Now, I promised last week, or a couple weeks ago when we were talking, a guy named James K.A. Smith has been a huge voice over the last number of years, especially through his little book. He created a little popular book of his ideas called You Are What You Love. Some of you have read this book in this room, and it has his idea around formation and liturgies has been, I think, the most formative idea the last few years that's not only helped pastors, but churches around this idea of worship and formation. I just want to take a couple minutes, if there's freedom in this room, just to highlight some of his ideas, just to show you what we're talking about when we talk about the heart being an idol factory. Is this okay? Is that all right? So I really, if you haven't read this, it's a phenomenal book. Smith is a professor of philosophy at Calvin College, up the back. I see you. Woo, woo. Some alumni, and just tremendous work. So this is the idea. Smith argues that liturgies or practices are the things that actually have formative power. These are the things that shape us. So what we practice is the thing that shapes us. So in the West, we tend to assume the way to make disciples and form character is to give people information, which will lead them to make good choices and become more like Jesus. But think about it. If that were true, all we'd need to do is read books or articles, and we would be transformed. How's that going for you? You know, and I'm sure none of us here have Googled how to have a body like Mark Wahlberg in their mid to late 30s. And me either, right? If it was that easy, friends, we would just read the book or the article and boom, it would happen. I love, and I shared this a couple weeks ago, Smith talks about being in Costco, and he was sitting and he was reading this book on reference from his daughter about clean eating as he gets older. And so he's reading this Wendell Berry book about clean eating and highlighting it and just into it, and then he realizes he's eating a hot dog in the Costco food court, right? And so in the West, we do this. We think information and how we think is deeply important. But even when we do something silly or wrong, what do we say? What was I thinking? Smith would say we tend to treat people fundamentally as knowers, but here's the thing. We're not simply knowers. Smith, in his work, he points to the church father Augustine, or Augustine, depending on how you want to say it, who articulated way back that we as humans are more than just brains on sticks. The most defining feature of our character is actually not what we know, but what we love, whether we can fully articulate it or not. With this in mind, he goes on and he talks about how to truly form a person, you actually have to get beyond their minds. Mind is a beautiful thing, but you have to get to their hearts or to their desires or to their affections. The other truth is that these loves are not, our loves as humans are often not formed logically. We may not even know, it's sitting in this room, what our loves are, let alone where our loves came from. So we don't love necessarily what we think. We learn to love and to desire long before we learn to think logically. Even deeper than this, and I know this is philosophical, but this preaches when it comes to formation so deeply, that our loves, for the most part, are shaped by our bodies. So in the Western church, we don't talk a lot about our bodies. We very much lean into Plato and his idea of separation of body and soul. But here's the thing, our loves are involved in our bodies, in our emotions, not just in our minds. So Smith would say, like, developing our loves is more like learning to drive, remember that? Or playing the piano where it's instinctive and habitual, or practicing a golf swing. And if you want to practice your golf swing, don't practice with me because I'm terrible. It's more like those things than it is like learning algebra or history. There's formation. Our loves are shaped by our routines, our rituals, our practices, or what we would call in the church, our loves are formed and shaped by our liturgies. So in the book, Smith he does this. He takes a number of things that he would call secular liturgies, and he shows how these things shape us and how they're designed or set up to make this point. So he uses, one of his examples is the mall. Yeah, baby. He says this, we enter the sanctuary, have our eyes drawn skyward to the vaulted pass through the central meeting area. We wander through various side chapels like H&M or the Gap or Build-A-Bear. Right? Any parents? Okay, so can I just stop and say something? Build-A-Bear, they just try and suck your life into that thing. Be careful. birthday deals where it's like, yeah, my kid is 5, come get a Build-A-Bear for your age, and then you spend like $80 on like all the accessories, and like, my Build-A-Bear has to be John Tavares. He doesn't have to be John Tavares. But anyways. So we enter in, we wander through the side chapels, he says, browsing the different offerings, experiencing multi-sensory worship through music and lighting and Manchu walk, food and drink and aromas and the like. Icons like mannequins and posters pointing to an idealized version of the good life, making transactions at altars, the checkout, the tills, in order to get closer to it and receive a benediction on the way out. Have a nice day. And when he wrote this, I was like, my goodness. There's things in our lives that form and shape us, and we are deeply unaware of it. You know, secular marketers have, and it's true, have a more holistic view of the human person than a lot of Christians do. They recognize the importance of patterns of behavior that form the heart, not just shape the mind. And that's what the mall does at times. It shapes our hearts. Smith would say that, and he uses this term, he would say that we're liturgical animals because we're fundamentally desiring creatures. We're embodied, practicing creatures whose loves and desires is aimed at something ultimate. See, I think Calvin was onto something. Our heart is bent towards something ultimate. And the idea is this: if we want to shape people's lives, we don't just need to shape their logic in the church. We talked about right brain, left brain stuff last time in Millennials, and I think it's true. The church needs to shape people's loves, which also means shaping their practices and their liturgies. You know, the idea is this, that there's a difference between knowing something and doing something, and there's a greater difference between doing something and wanting to do something. There's a difference between in your head knowing something and doing it. There's a much greater difference between doing something and wanting to do something. And the idea is this: there's power in our habits. They form us. So when people say, you want to change, you don't have to just think about your mind and what you think. That's a no-brainer, no pun intended. Obviously, we think about those things. But if we really want to change as people, transformation, we have to reorient our lives through daily habit. And we don't talk about habit and formation enough in the church. The funny thing is we get this with other disciplines, right? We get that habit and practice in other disciplines actually is the thing that changes us. So I said last time, we have 3 barbaric boys who like eat, drink, sleep, breathe hockey. And I think it slipped out of my mouth. I said they're at the rink. I'm at the rink 6 or 7 hours a day last time. That was not true. That was meant to be a week, okay? Some of you are like, do you have a job? Yes, I have a job. Yes, my kids, they go to school. Right? But here's the thing with them. They all deeply love hockey, and here's what I didn't do. I didn't give them a book and say, read about it, and you'll be really great. And I didn't put on a YouTube video, though we watch lots of YouTube videos, and say, listen, if you watch this, you're going to be amazing. That's part of it. But as a dad, they want to do this, okay? I'm not pushing this on them. If they want to do this, as somebody who's played a lot of hockey in his life, I want skating to them to be as natural as breathing. And so this means hours upon hours upon hours of formation so that their natural response when it's time to play a game is to skate and to respond and to maneuver well.